Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. This would be the Jeff Cameron Show right here on 93.3 Real Talk Radio and Warchant TV on a Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. Always say that as we get things started. No Florida State game to harm us this past weekend. Well, at least not in football. In basketball, they fought. They couldn't get a rebound, and they fell. But it wasn't one of those kinds of losses where you're angry. One of those kinds of losses where you're like, okay, I see a little something to work with here. I see a little something here. They got to get better. They're not a great team, but they got some length and they can defend a little bit. We'll see. But no Florida State football, although that didn't get me a respite from thinking about Florida State football some more. In fact, it caused me to think even more about Florida State football. Let me give you the lowdown of this afternoon. We're recording this, and we're recording this on a Sunday, to be honest with you, not even on a Monday. And this hour is a fresh hour of content in the sense that it was done yesterday. But it is the only hour that is new. The rest of the show will be the remaining 2 hours will be best of. My son goes into surgery today. In fact, as you're watching this now, he's in recovery, and we're spending the day with him and getting him home and kind of situated. So, I wish I could tell you that everything went well and that everything's okay, but I don't know just yet. So this is a weird week for me and the family just because that surgery is taking place, and he's pretty well bedridden for a few days. So that's just what we're doing right now. But we didn't want to not do something. We didn't want to not at least have something to put out there. It's interesting because, I thought, Tom, the angle could be, the results of the games we saw on Saturday and, just this, we really don't have anything from a coaching standpoint yet. There was the subject of, I saw where Castellanos decided to leave BC, by the way, in a manner that is humiliating and would leave me to say that I would never want him on any team that I had anything to do with. So I certainly hope Florida State's not entertaining the idea of bringing him in. Also, he's not very good. So there's that matter. And, so I guess I could address that to start with. Like, I hope they're not looking at him. But, I don't know who the hell gets benched and then decides I quit. But
you're hearing mixed reviews about the why beyond the benching. So I would reserve judgment personally on that, but I don't know. Like, to me, if 7-5 is acceptable next year, which we talked about in the red zone, then maybe you could see him, being mobile with an offensive line that's not so great. But I don't know. I think the guys you have on campus at that point, you might as well just ride with if you're going to bring that guy in.
Well, what is the mixed message that I'm missing then? He didn't quit on his team with 3 games to play?
It's possible that there were dynamics with the coaching staff behind the scenes. It's my point to that would be, Tom, if that's the case, that's another red flag that I don't want. You don't have time right now to be dealing with potential problems with guys who, I don't. Here's the one thing I'd say. If you look at the rushing usage for Castellanos this season under Bill O'Brien, it's going to be a pro-style system. We all knew that. He had 75 yards against us. It wasn't even until late that he ran. They didn't need to run him. That's the most rushing yardage he's had this season, and he's a 1,000-yard rusher prior to that. So clearly Bill O'Brien did not want to use him to at least what his resume had been coming into the season. Now he had 18-5 touchdown to interception ratio this year, but his legs are kind of the weapon you would want to use. And if he has under 200 yards rushing this season with BC, and most of them are against us, it seems like square peg round hole. That would be where I would withhold and just maybe find out more if I was Florida State and I was interested in at least taking his phone call.
Yeah, I wouldn't take his phone call. I have no interest in him whatsoever. I don't think there's any good reason for him to leave in the middle of a season. So I wouldn't do it. They lose yesterday 38-28 to SMU, or Saturday, I should say. They hung in there. They've hung in a lot of football games this year. They've been more competitive than they've been in the past. The program, I think, was upwardly mobile in that regard. They may go bowling this year.
I got no interest in him. But as far as what Florida State should do and what Florida State will do, well, we'll all have opinions about that, and we'll all debate various players that may or may not be interested. I think we all do realize that a major overhaul is coming, and it has to come, and that will continue to be the line of thought and conversation that we get into. But, I was thinking about it yesterday or Saturday, Tom, and I texted you this, and we talked a little bit about this off the air. And it's a recurring theme here that really troubles me, and I fight with myself on this because I know things can spiral, and I know that once they go bad, it's awfully difficult to get them back in a singular season, But I watched just too many teams this year, too many games this year of teams that are going nowhere, that have nothing to play for, that are not even going to get to be bowl eligible, whose seasons were lost weeks and weeks ago. And all of them fight. All of them play games hard. All of their players play hard, play fast, play as if today is what matters and not the week before's result. I watch teams, needless to say, we just watched the University of Florida at home against what would have been a desperate LSU team, a team that needed to win to keep alive what hopes they had to go to the SEC championship game, a team that has a lot of talent, a team that has a good offensive line that was running the ball successfully against Florida in the first half of that game, early in the third quarter. And yet Florida fights and fights and fights and hammers away and gets a win. And both sides of the ball play extremely hard. This is a coach who will have his, a non-winning season for the third consecutive year, and they're fighting like hell for him. I'm telling you now, Tom, that is the most damning aspect of what happened here. It's not the record. The record sucks. Got it. Worth noting. It's historically bad. It's that they don't believe and don't care to fight for Mike Norvell. They don't believe in him, and they don't care to fight for him. Because if they did, we wouldn't be watching what we've watched all of these weeks. And I see it everywhere around the country where teams keep playing hard. And I get it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse. It's just that point was hammered home again yesterday. I'll give you another example. Kansas has nothing going for it. Nothing going for it. They had 3 wins going into yesterday, and they beat undefeated BYU. And they fought their ass off to do it. We can keep going. There's a bunch of games like this. That's a 4-5 Southern Cal team who is bitterly disappointing and fought like hell to try to get to be bowl eligible and won their game Saturday against Nebraska.
Utah's in there too.
Oh, Utah fought their ass off, had 0 chance to beat Colorado. Their best offensive tackle, their best wide receiver, 2 of their quarterbacks. They're down to their 3rd string quarterback who's not any good at all. Playing their top tight end who's going to be a 1st or 2nd round draft pick. And they kept fighting, kept playing hard, kept playing physically. Man, it's just a terrible, terrible look, and it is a really damning statement about what happened here. And it's just, I don't know what else to say about it beyond it's very troubling. It says to me that the players didn't believe in Mike Norvell. They didn't believe in Mike.
Yeah, correct. And it speaks to the number of guys that have to come in here, new people, high school kids, transfer portal kids, the people that need to leave. I mean, we've talked about this the last week or two. Like, what's the number going to be? Is it 35? Is it 50? Because if you believe that the settlement with Congress is going to go through, that's 105 scholarships that you could have for a football program at one given time. So that does inflate the balloon, so to speak. But, even without that, let's just say the number is 85. How many new kids do you need on the team? I think it's probably closer to 50 than it is 30. So because you've got to have guys that are invested in the message. And you're right. Like, Florida could actually finish with a winning record, man. I mean, like, I don't think
they win their bowl game.
If they win the bowl game. Yeah, because they're going to beat us, barring something crazy. And this is the damning thing where I told you I was broken a few weeks ago, was watching North Carolina play. And I think it was the Virginia game that I was watching start to finish. And I thought, God, both of these teams are rubbish. And Florida State should be well within its range to make this competitive and perhaps win at home against North Carolina. But you have to stop yourself. It's like putting bumpers in a bowling lane. You're like, man, this ain't You're not looking at this objectively. Memphis was like that. Cal was like that. SMU was like that. Boston College was like that. So was Georgia Tech. All of these games are within reach if you're competent, if you care. But that's assuming something that just isn't true for Florida State. We don't care. We're not competent. So stop assuming. You might have more talent if we did a 1 through 85 NFL combine competition, but this is football. This is 11 dudes carrying together at one time, and we don't have that.
Stanford had lost 6 consecutive games. 6 consecutive games. One of them just a week ago was against NC State, in which they gave up 59 points to NC State. And Saturday they beat a Louisville team that has had, obviously we've seen what Louisville's done. That's a good football team. And they beat them 38-35. It's a crazy ending. All of that is true. But my point would be there were no indicators. The scores of the games Stanford had lost in the weeks previous were 40-14, 31-7, 49-7, 40-10, 27-4, and 24, 59-28. And they go out and score 38 points against Louisville and win a game. There is zero chance Florida State would go out and score 30 any points to anybody other than Charleston Southern maybe this upcoming Saturday. I just, Tom, it concerns me to no end, and I can't seem to get past it. I don't know how that happened. And it's the most damning aspect of all of it. I could live with 1-11, 2-10, whatever it's going to be. I could handle it. I can't handle that they didn't believe in him and they quit on him, specifically him.
Well, and some of the specific players that are playing hard. Like I texted you last night. We were watching Georgia, Tennessee, and going back and forth. That Josh Farmer and Darrell Jackson are trying harder than Shaheem Brown and Maurice Smith. Like, or they're more competent than, if you're not comfortable with the term.
No, I say trying hard is correct.
I'm perfectly comfortable with that sentiment, because Maurice has been blowing assignments from a between the ears standpoint since Dublin. So those were the guys that were holding the program hostage in the offseason when there were, potential dalliances with Miami. And those two guys have been more consistent performers than dudes you thought were of the program, had been around for a long time. Here's their chance to show their wares. I mean, yeah, that speaks volumes. And you mentioned last week that Darrell might come back, or maybe Josh Farmer might come back. That's great, as long as they don't do the same dance they did about NIL last year. But, I mean, we were thinking of those guys as question marks. Like, are they really invested? And yet, when you look at 10 games, you say, well, Farmer's not been a problem. Like, Patrick Payton's been a bigger issue than Josh Farmer. And you can go down the line. There are more players like that where you're saying, do they care? Are they just jogging around the football field? There's too much of that. Plain and simple. We were talking about it last month.
So what would you do?
The football field.
I in order not to sound like a broken record, and it's hammered home every Saturday. I mean, we just gave you a slew of examples of teams that have zero chance to compete in anything that matters this year, and they're out there fighting their ass off, pulling off upsets and doing all these things. I mean, it's ridiculous. But the point would be, what would you do if you were Mike? Like, first of all, you'd have to take that personally. You'd really have to take that personally. You'd have to be like, well, boy, my message did not land with this group at all.
Here's the problem. You don't have bowl practices to flip that message. You lost them. Like, a lot of times you'll hear transitional coaching staffs or just people in general around the game say that those bowl practices matter. Even if you have kids who opt out, you get the younger kids to develop, and those 15. I mean, it's a cliche we roll our eyes at until you don't have them. And now we don't. So when does he grab their attention? Tour of duty? Meeting rooms? Because it cannot be on the field. So that's the difficult thing. I think the only way for him to move forward is to be a different guy. Like, he almost has to be a different person in that sphere of working in the workout rooms or in the meeting rooms or on the practice fields. And to the holdovers, he says, different day, guys. It's a different day. So the standard is over here. Like, he can't just be himself. He's been, when he got out of 0-4, it was because he was consistently the same person.
Stayed the path.
I don't think he can this time, because this is a mess that he's made himself, not one that he was inheriting from a previous coach.
Yeah, I just don't know what you would do. I think you'd have to have a one-on-one, I think you really would have to do the one-on-one thing with every player on this team. And you'd have to see where their head is at, and you'd have to be brutally honest with yourself, first of all. I mean, if you're rejected by every single person that you have to have believe in you, that's tough, buddy. That's tough. It's not like a player who's at an important position screwed you. It's all of them because they don't play hard, and they haven't played hard at all.
I agree. This is where I would push back a little bit. Like, if I was listing players that I believe are invested, Juice Cryer, Omar Graham, Daniel Lyons, Edwin Joseph, at safety, I don't know. Well, Quindarius Jones, I think, is invested. I mean, but you have to do this dance. I mean, Byron Turner cares. Unfortunately, Lola Hay is leaving you, so he doesn't count anymore. Landon Thomas cares. Some of the young running backs do. Unfortunately, it's maybe 50% of a head count, but you do have guys that you can turn to in that moment. I just wish they were more talented, that they make a larger difference.
Yeah. And maybe that's part of it too. Yeah. It's in watching it over and over again on Saturday. It's just, it once again sort of hit hard that they checked out long ago. And I just see so many bad teams out there fighting their ass off, scratching and clawing and believing and being there for one another and doing those things. And really, like, I mean, if you're a 3-win team and you're down 2 scores, that you don't expect to see that team keep battling and battling. I mean, I would expect it if I'm a competitor, but like this late in the season, you see a lot of going through the motions a lot of years. And I saw so many teams just fight their ass off Saturday.
Well, I think Utah is a great example because that's a 3-0 game. You have a 4th down free play. It's a jump ball to the sideline. And Sanders throws up a prayer, but he should because it's a free play, and it comes away with a touchdown. Then they get a stop and they have a punt return for a touchdown, 14-3. Like anybody watching the game from afar can see at that point that Colorado is athletically on a level that is just different than Utah. And Utah has been a multi-time conference champion. Does not matter yesterday that the Buffaloes were a superior program.
Yeah,
they were imposing their will. You've got no shot to win this football game. So I turned it off. I went and I watched other things from the noon window. Next thing you know, it's within touch, in the 4th quarter. How does it get there? I didn't watch it, but I know how it got there is belief. That's the only way. Whittingham has his dudes believing in him when they're outgunned. And that's a loss that if I'm a fan of Utah, I'm not happy about losing, but I'm saying, well, at least they fight for him. They're in touch with him.
Well, they always would. They always would. That's what I mean. The connectivity, the connection that we're trying to create. I think Mike having to recreate that is scary. I don't know that he can. He might be able to. I may be wrong on that. I just don't know that he can. I'm rooting for him too. I'm hoping he can. And I tell you what is troubling about it, Tom, because I would tell you that if we were going to judge Mike on a variety of things, I would tell you that some of the public appearances at booster meetings or some of the outward gesturing that goes on sometimes when he's trying to send a message to his team through the press might come across as performative. You can occasionally see something where you're like, well, that's a little performative. It's like the opening press conference where you're like, okay. It's a little over the top. It's a little evangelical. It's a bit much for my taste. Okay.
It's a good word. Yeah.
Okay. So that'll happen where you're like, oh, okay. But then the compliment to Mike is that I don't believe that's who he is. I believe the guy we see day to day is much more who he is. And that guy really does care deeply about the guys, about the players, about the coaches and the kids in his program. That guy is the guy that was raised by football. That's the guy that gets it, that understands what kind of brotherhood football really is.
He's a guy that if you're having a tough day, he'll make you smile, by shouting out your name. If you're in the facility and you're a player and you have a breakup, you have whatever, bad grade, something in life is affecting you. You walk into that facility and he's just happens to be around. He could be on the 3rd floor looking down at the 1st floor. He will shout at the top of his lungs, like, "Hey, Edwin!" And you would have to just laugh. You're like, he's nuts. But it would calm you down. Like that's the power that he has because he's consistently that dude.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's real. I think that's from having played the game and been a young coach that, had this rise to prominence through hard work. And, he had great insight into calling plays, did a great job. And I don't know, I hate for him that he has to reassess that whole situation about how he better connects to people, because I think he does have to figure that out. I mean, it is, I think that would be the most damning aspect of what he's watching play out, is when he's sitting there going, oh, well, man, you know what? Best laid plans here. They're not even, look, again, Billy Napier was dead in the water, guys. Dead in the water. There was talk that Florida's players had quit on him after the Texas A&M game. You go all the way back to the beginning of the season, that he was as good as fired. Boosters had raised the money to get rid of him. This was a matter of just playing out the string. Yeah, no, maybe not. Maybe not at all. Maybe they fight like hell all the time.
Set odds before the season of, okay, we guarantee you that one team between the Seminoles and Gators is not going to play in a bowl.
Right.
Which one is it?
Right.
And Florida State would be a minus 400 favorite. Florida would be a plus 650 underdog. And yet, by about game 3 for both teams, you could see, oh, crap, this is the opposite way.
Well, and it's just, again, there's something that they can latch onto right now that Florida State cannot. And it doesn't help him. It certainly doesn't help him from a perception standpoint that a program that was dead and buried and got off to a terrible start as predicted continued, though, to fight like hell and now may go to a bowl. And they play in a much better conference than the ACC. So that is that's something. That is something to behold, and it just adds it's insult to injury this year for Florida State. It really is. And that's kind of the weekend takeaway was, oh man, it can get worse even when we don't play. It can actually, and I hate, listen, I get it. If you just flip the channel right now, I got it, man. I got it. I'm trying to have honest dialogue with you.
Well, okay, honest dialogue. We were texting back and forth when Georgia got off to a slow start on Saturday night. And, because the fans were booing the offense as they came off the field.
Which is crazy.
How spoiled we get very quickly. It's a great case study in a fan base because they hadn't won a damn thing in 40 years. And now, if you have a couple empty possessions at home after struggling, you're going to get booed with 2 natties in the last 4 years. Okay, fine, fair, maybe unfair, but that's where we are. But yet Georgia bounces back. Like, if we're getting booed off the field in the first quarter in Tallahassee this season,
there's no fight back.
It's because we're setting the over/under at 3.5 more points for the game. Like, we're not going to rally and drop 30 on a team. We're going to rally to score 9. Like, that's the difference.
Well, and that guy, I texted you when we were having that conversation. I'm like, man, that is a special kind of spoiled because they're 42-2 prior to this season.
Right.
Good Lord, man.
Actually, there's somebody who works for a Le Batard show, Lucy, who goes on the road and she goes to all these games. It's great content that they do, but she tweeted out, Georgia's fans are booing their offense coming off the field. I've never been so at home than I am at Athens, because she's an Iowa grad. She's like, I understand these people.
Yeah.
But it's a different animal. It's just for us. We're worse than that Iowa offense we were all laughing about last year. We're so much worse. It's ridiculous.
Much worse. Devastatingly worse. Yes, I would agree that that's true. Chef Cameron Show, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. Tom, I know you did a video with Michael Langston, our own Michael Langston, and we were looking, if you go to warchant.com, you'll see the closer look at the coordinators that Florida State may or may not be interested in. Whether it's offensive or defensive coordinator candidates. I tend to find myself, I don't know why, in a year in which the offense is as bad as this one is, I still find myself flocking to the defensive side. It might have to do with the fact that I think defense sets the tone with what kind of toughness you are, what kind of toughness you possess. So I feel like if you have a rock solid defense, it gives you a chance to figure some things out offensively. But also just the nature of defensive football. It's so violent, so rugged, and it demands a togetherness that offensive football doesn't necessarily demand. And so I tend to look to that side of the football. Now, I don't know, and I don't certainly want to rub people the wrong way here on our own staff, but I don't know how we come up with these candidates other than these are maybe a wish list, because I don't know what's realistic or not. I mean, obviously, for those that don't know what I'm referring to, you have Oregon's Chris Hampton. He's obviously a guy that a lot of people look to. He's a rising star in the business. Really, all these guys are. Tyler Santucci's a guy that I kind of thought about when I realized we were going to make some changes on the staff. I like Santucci as a guy who's done good things at Texas A&M and Notre Dame, currently at Georgia Tech, a young up-and-coming coordinator there. You look at Charlie Partridge, I didn't know anything about. I'm learning more about him. Tavares Robinson's a guy that I think the fan base immediately would get excited about because he's been an elite recruiter at Georgia. So, you see the Georgia success and you know what Kirby Smart demands of his assistant coaches. And really, I think that's part of Mike's makeover is Mike is going to have to demand more of himself and of his coaches in the recruiting world. So if somehow you got a guy like that who's had to do it, who's had to work under a coach who is absolutely maniacal and has had huge success bringing in 5-star players, tons of 5-star talent to a place that demands it of you in the footprint that you play in. And, so I guess you would look at that and say, I want that guy. But I don't know how realistic that is. And I really don't know. I mean, I wonder what Florida State is offering in terms of why would you leave Georgia to come to Florida State? I guess just a shot at elevated status where you would be the actual DC. Okay. Yeah. Maybe, I mean, I guess that's what it is, but
that's how we got Pruitt here was, okay, you can actually call the plays like you design what you execute rather than he designs, the head man does, and you execute what he wants to design. The thing I would say is that this is where being a Florida State fan, as much as we're not in a good conference relative to the Power 2, still has its advantage. It's a brand.
Yeah.
We're going to bring the money, and you have a chance to design and execute your own vision. There's no way that Mike Norvell starts thinking that, hey, let me get involved and make us a 3-3-5 team. Like he's an offensive head coach. So you're going to get opportunity here. And that's where I think you can mirror maybe a wish list or, do they have ties somewhere along the lines in their histories as a coaching staff with the reality that this is Florida State. If we were doing a UCF, hot board for the defensive coordinator, not the same problem. You could say that UCF is in a better place as a football program at present, and you might be right, but they're still UCF. This is where the brand of FSU, when it comes calling and says that you can be a coordinator here, you will attract big names. And we had that discussion last week of how many big names is Mike Norvell really getting in here? Well, if there's an opportunity for advancement, if there's a promotion involved from where you are to where you're going, and let's just say that you're a position coach or somebody who hasn't called plays or installed your vision, this is where, a name like Hampton from Oregon or Tavares Robinson from Georgia or a guy like Santucci from Georgia Tech, like this is an upgrade for every single one of those coaching prospects to come here and run a defense start to finish.
It is, and it is a chance to, especially if you have the stability that you're going to need to be guaranteed before you say yes to a job like that, it's a chance to really sink your teeth into it and become a rising star in the industry. Imagine you turn this defense into one of the more prominent or better thought of defenses. You're going to get a head coaching job. You're going to suddenly be a candidate for that when you do it at a place like Florida State. So I agree with you on that front. It's the one thing we have going for us, which is the cachet. The cachet that Florida State is still a massive brand and a place that goodness gracious, that when you're operating to peak efficiency, you can be great. You can be national championship great. It's just that now we have way too many seasons in which good is the outlier, and that has got to stop. I'm just searching along with greatness and tenacity in recruiting for stability at a time where it's really hard to find stability in college football. We're yearning for it, and we thought we had it. My goodness gracious, did we think we had it?
Well, I mean, look, we just got done talking about different programs around the country. Like Florida is more stable than we are. Now, they're losing a lot of games, more than they want to, but 1-win seasons or 2-win seasons is not in the possibility, spectrum for Florida. Now, this year they're going to win 6 at minimum. But I mean, like even in the losing seasons, they weren't going to go 1-9 in their first 10. So let's start with baby steps here. And I think that, the recruiting acumen of the guy you bring in can help you raise the floor. High school recruiting acumen can take a 1-win season out of the equation. And I think that's where they have to focus first with that hire, because it can help you, again, raise the floor, hit the portal hard, develop some players, and then the ceiling goes up with it. We now know that Mike Norvell's range is way, way, way too wide. Perfect regular season, 2-win regular season. That's way too wide.
What I think is fascinating is that so many of the folks that we've talked to regarding the coaching hires that are going to take place will quickly pivot to, okay, all things being equal between this coach and this coach, who's the guy that's bringing us this amount of players or that amount of players? I get that that's a factor. It's a consideration, especially if there's a couple of 5-stars that are thinking about coming with them. But, I don't worry about that. I don't spend any time thinking about it at all. If it presents itself and I, have to make a choice because these two guys are the finalists for the job, then yeah, I guess I'll consider it. But honestly, if you're talking about, if we're going to marry this conversation with the one from the first segment, where you're talking about possibly bringing in 40 or 50 new players, I just want them to be the best version of themselves. Not the 5-star kid that we might get if we get this coordinator. Great. That'd be cool. That'd be awesome. I want them, the players that is, to be coached by guys who get the most out of whatever they are. Can we start with that? Because we're not getting the most out of players around here these days. And I want to know that that's going to happen every week.
Yeah, I think that's why you're probably, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but more interested in the defensive hire. Because when you're either, and Florida State is either one of these two things, or maybe a combination of both, but it's not zero. It's not neither.
Right. Yeah.
You're either weak mentally or weak physically. That's where we are right now. We're either one or the other, maybe a combination of the two, but we ain't exactly strong in either of those categories. When we play, we look weak. And a defensive coordinator who brings in the mindset that you're talking about, like, again, Muschamp is a great example as a caricature of the position of the job as defensive coordinator. Of course, our own Mickey Andrews is from decades ago. But if you bring in a guy like that who instills the toughness on defense, you will see it first before you see it on offense. And when you're devoid of it, a defensive coordinator can bring that spirit that becomes contagious.
Yeah, and I want to hear when we go out to spring, almost more than I want to hear certain types of instruction, I want to hear coaches who yell, "Get up!" I am so tired of people laying on the effing ground. It happens all the time at practice. It happens all the time in games. I'm telling you, it's a snapshot of the weakness you're referring to. Laying around, it's a loser's limp. It is embarrassing, and it's a great indicator of how soft we are. It's after the most mundane tackles. It's unreal how often our guys lay on the ground. Stop that. Start with something as simple as get up. Listen, if you're hurt, injured, everybody gets it. You're injured, maybe you can't get up. Maybe your leg is shattered. You can't get up. If that's the case, got it. Other than that, you get your ass up. And I feel like it starts with that. It just starts with something as simple and basic as, remember, we don't want to be laying on the ground, guys. I hear Norvell yell it a lot on offense when guys make a catch and fall to the ground. He'll say, "Get off the ground, get off the ground." Now, it didn't translate in any way in the course of the season. But
there's also the clip we played in preseason where he talks about violence, violent mindset, violent minds, whatever. I forget the exact phrase he used.
Yeah.
Yeah. That fell on deaf ears, unfortunately.
Those coordinators need to bring that to the party. They need to bring that to the party, my friend, because that's the one. You're gonna have to do that. Because that's
where you hire maybe special assistant to the defense, Mike Singletary. You're like, oh, okay, he's in charge of morale. Our morale coach is Singletary. Just somebody like that where you go, whoo. Well, you're not going to step to him and say, well, my hammy hurts today, and he's does it. You look me in the eye for 5 seconds, then you say it again. And if you can, I'll give you a rep off.
Oh, buddy. By the way, really quick before we go to break, Tried and True Consulting, you hear me talk about them a lot. I didn't go back and take note of something that I should have. We had contributions of almost $500 this last get together at the bar, but 200 pounds of canned food collected, Tom, for this last get together.
That's nicely done. Nicely done.
Well, I just want to point out that it was sort of a last second thing that Tried and True wanted to be a part of, that they got involved in, and they said, hey, can we mention this? Let's get together for a quick happy hour over in Midtown and go to Barrel Proof Lounge. And that was all cool, and it was all great, but that was just a really drop in the bucket, and we got that kind of response. So, I wanted to thank everybody involved. I wanted to thank Second Harvest of the Big Ben. I wanted to thank everybody that was there at Barrel Proof, and I wanted to thank everybody who stopped by. But we're just getting started because he's followed up since that time and said, oh, that's buoyed them. They're excited. Now they want to get a much bigger, more involved. And maybe you talk about super beneficial to all of us. Maybe we have 2 golf tournaments in 1 year, Tom. Maybe we start really expanding, and I'm down with that. Definitely down with that.
I am too, and Don has tremendous organizational skills. So if he wants to organize the golf tournament in the fall, I am all for that. There's nothing better than teeing it up and raising money for a good cause. And they're down with it too. Whatever it is, they've already expressed interest in the bowling tournament, which we'll have a date for soon. But like everything, top to bottom, you love to support and talk about organizations whose heart is in the right place, not just because they see the profit margin. And Tried and True is that way. They're awesome.
Look them up online if you need to, Tried and True Consulting. They're based out of Orlando, but they do stuff here in Tallahassee, all over the state, really, and fantastic to work with them. Jeff Cameron Show, wrapping up the hour here in a moment, 93.3 Real Talk Radio and Warchant TV. Gotta say, it would be pretty cool to have this moment. I don't know if you saw it over the weekend, but Indiana rewarded their football coach, Kurt Signetti, Sigs, as we all call him these days, for his, stunning turnaround of Indiana football. They gave him a new contract that averages $8 million plus a year, plus a $1 million retention bonus, Tommy. The $1 million retention bonus, just $1 million just to keep you before we even.
Are you still here? Cool. Here you go.
It runs through the end of the 2032 season. And I don't know if you've watched Big Ten football for the last 100 years. You didn't see that coming. So there he is with a massive buy. Would you have signed it is my question. I guess I need more details, right? I mean, he's got to have some outs in that.
You said massive buyout. So do you know the figure of the buyout?
Let me see here.
If I'm Sigs, like if let's just say Sexton is my agent, he would tell me, Sexton, if somebody's desperate enough, they'll pay the buyout and you'll get the raise. So it doesn't matter to you. And so just sign this contract. It's great. You've got them leveraged. They need to keep you. Just take the deal. So yes, the answer is yes, I would sign it.
I think you're right, and I'm trying to find that exact number. His original contract paid him $4.25 million this year. The move takes him from near the bottom of the Big Ten to in the top 5. And obviously, he had great success prior to arriving at Indiana. He was 52-9 at James Madison. This turnaround is this is one of the best seasons in the history of the program by far. And they have a 92% chance to make the college football playoff right now, which is crazy.
Did you say that he was making 4.5 earlier before this deal?
4.25.
Yeah. So yes, it's basically you're almost doubling it when you consider. You're pretty much doubling it when you consider the retention bonus. So I mean, you sign that deal, and if Ohio State a year from now, after you prove that it's not just James Madison dudes, if Ohio State comes calling because they're tired of Ryan Day losing a game or two a year, they'll pay the buyout and you'll win the day. But you take that 8.5 plus the 1 all day, every day, buddy.
You know what's fun is to do the thing. Okay, anytime this comes up, then you have to get in there and look really closely. Obviously, the one that stands out for us is the fact that Mike Norvell makes $10 million a year, and he is number 6 on the list for coaches currently, behind Ryan Day, Lincoln Riley, Steve Sarkisian. Dabo Sweeney's making 11-1 currently. and Kirby Smart, who's atop all coaches at 13.2 per. But Kalen DeBoer is making $10 million as well. Brian Kelly at $9,975,000. But the one that stands out to me, buddy, and I like him, but man, Mark Stoops is making top 10 money in college football. Did you know that?
Well, I knew that he had enough success at Kentucky that they were afraid of losing him. Same thing as with Siggs, right? You know, if you think about him as a $9.5 million coach, it's different than 8.5 plus one, and he moves up the list. But he cashed in for his successes. He bet on himself. Kentucky was wowed with his 5-year plan and his 10-year plan. I think he nailed the 5-year plan.
Yeah, it's going to get hard.
That 10-year plan, I don't think so. So I'm sure the buyout's pretty stiff too.
The buyout for Mark Stoops is $44 million.
Woo.
School buyout. By the way,
that's why he's not on the defensive coordinator hot board, I would imagine.
By the way, James Franklin currently makes more money annually and has a higher buyout at Penn State than my man Dan Lanning at Oregon. Dan needs to go to Nike and Phil Knight and say, hey, what the hell?
Even if he doesn't, the whispers of whatever NFL opening that comes up is going to see him to be paid a ton of money. What did you think of the fake field goal on Saturday night? Did you like it?
Obviously, when it doesn't work, they survive with the interception. But
so it's funny. Blackledge said, "I'd rather have, if you're going to go for it, I'd rather have it in Dylan Gabriel's hands." And part of me is like, he's overrated. I like the call. Good. You know, when D'Antonio did it, I think it was Michigan State, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And it was a success, raging success as a walk-off winner for Michigan State. Nobody complained then. They still have the ball pinned way back in their own territory. I thought it was actually kind of a nice moment to call a fake in that situation.
Yeah, it's funny. We know we play the results. All of us play the results on this. I just get into whether or not it was a sound decision or whether or not it was crazy person talk or something like that. You know, like I understood it. It didn't work. It's like
right. For first down wins you the game, and they shouldn't ever see it coming in that moment. But maybe what they should have been alert to, and the broadcast talked about this on NBC, that's a good Saturday night team, the NBC
They
team.
do a good job. And by the way, Blackledge, man, he felt so bad for us the other night.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's like, well, I feel terrible for Florida State fans.
They should have known because Ian Eagle's son, I think it's Noah Eagle, he said, uncharacteristically conservative decision from Dan Lanning on third down there to call a run. Like, that should be when the antennae go up, because here comes the fake field goal through the B gap.
It's funny when you listen to broadcast teams this year, anytime they get our game, if they're new to our game, if they're new to our season, it's the same reaction you get from that I've talked about last week, that you get from the friends that haven't been watching and then finally do. And it's the same reaction you get from fans of other teams that have no reason to pay attention to you until the game between you and them gets closer. And then they tune in just to see, what it's going to look like. And they're like, oh, no, what is happening over here? And they're like, hey, Ass, have you seen the results of these games?
It's a popular meme from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah.
Andre Brower. You see it on Instagram.
Rest in peace, Andre Brower.
Rest in peace. Yeah. Oh. No.
We do it once. Normally we do it once a year. You and I do, where one of us says to the other, have you watched the Titans play? Have you seen, and you're like,
that's a great example, because opening weekend, one of our buddies had people over to the house, and it was Bears and Titans, and there was a Bears fan there. So I watched all of Will Levis, and within 2 possessions, it was, No.
Yes. It's hilarious because I don't remember what week it was. It might have been week 3 or something like that. I tuned in and saw the Will Levis experience. And I watched that game and I couldn't take my eyes off of it. They were so effing bad. It might have been
Well, I can't remember exactly when it was, but it might have been one of those days where Levis threw for like 90 yards against Indianapolis. In fact, that's exactly what it was. When they lost to Indianapolis and he threw for 95 yards, Tom, I watched that game and went, oh, no.
Well, yeah, it's like a, you think the NFL experience would be a great tourist experience. Like you go to the Empire State Building, you're going to hop on the elevators. And like the elevator's broken. You're going to have to walk up the steps if you want to get up to the observation deck. That's what it's like going into the stands and realizing that Will Levis is your quarterback. Like,
man, you're like, really? This is what we're doing out here.
It's going to be a lot of work today. Going to be a lot of work.
A lot of 27-play drives if we're to be successful here. Next 2 hours are best of. I am again out for the rest of the day.
Get well, Bryce. I speak for everybody. Get well, Bryce.
Yeah, hopefully everything went well. But I'll talk with you guys tomorrow. And thanks for bearing with us here to start the week.